Welcome to the catch-up of our last year. As I watched the video I produced last fall, I discovered I was supposed to catch you up on more of our adventures in the Okefenokee Swamp. Our first campsite was literally across the street from the road to the Okefenokee National Park. It was a beautiful spot. We really liked it, but we only stayed a week. Then we moved to a spot in the nearest town and spent a month there in the beautiful weather of South Georgia. While we were there, we had several fun adventures. Probably the favorite thing we did was called a sunset tour in the Okefenokee Swamp. We ended up being the only two on the tour, so we had essentially a private sunset tour where we drove out into the swamp and saw animals and plants and all kinds of really cool things, and parked in a large open grassy swampy area and watched the sunset. One of the nicest things about seeing these parts of the country in the winter is the lack of bugs. No mosquitoes, no gnats, no flies. The tannins in the water made it amazingly reflective. It was like we were driving over a mirror. While we were there, we were visited by the local alligator who decided to come and see what we were doing and then just swam away. As we headed back in after watching the sunset, a whole bunch of birds came flying in to rest for the night at their rookery. And then we just glided along in the twilight. All the way back to the ranger station. If you are ever in the area, I highly recommend this particular tour. The azaleas everywhere were in fabulous full bloom. On a different day, we went to the Okefenokee Swamp Park, which is sort of a state park, but it is run much more like a touristy park. There is a train, there is a boat tour, there are walking trails. They have a lovely camellia garden that was only partly in bloom while we were there. They have shows and all kinds of other scheduled things. I found it a very interesting park, but it is a state park, even if it didn't feel like it. On another weekend, we decided to drive around the swamp to go to the western side where the Suwannee River is. The Suwannee River Park was amazing. We missed all of the tours, but they would rent john boats with a motor. So we rented one for a couple of hours and drove around in the swamp. Could have spent a lot longer there. It was so cool. It was a little crowded with kayaks. We couldn't even park to explore the island because there were no spaces left. They were full of kayaks. Occasionally we parked to let them go by. When we left the Okefenokee area, we moved up to the Charleston area. We spent 2 weeks camped in a lovely park there and took some days to go visit the beach and other days to visit other places in the area, including a few plantations. It was lovely to be in this area as spring blossomed. After South Carolina, we moved into North Carolina in the Charlotte area so that Mike could go spend a few days in the office. We had to drive past this cemetery anytime we went anywhere, and it was a beautiful cemetery. So on a cool, rainy spring day, we went in and drove around to take some pictures of the trees that were just so stunning in that cemetery. On one of our exploratory drives, we found a wildlife drive and went and took it. It starts out around this lake that's full of dead trees and full of birds. There were some turtles too, but it was still cool, and a lot of the weather-sensitive animals weren't really out yet. But the woodpeckers were amazing. I found the wisteria in bloom to be so beautiful, but there were some places where it is obvious that it has become an invasive species. We were close enough to the Blue Ridge Parkway that we went and took some drives along it. This part of the parkway we had not really spent much time driving, so it was really neat to see a different part of the parkway. Much like it's a good time of year to visit because there are not bugs, it's also a good time of year to visit the Blue Ridge Parkway because there are not leaves. You can see much farther than you can if you go when the leaves are out. It might seem desolate, but the views were stunning. As promised, here's a little pottery, which can still make this a pottery video. Here I'm painting our new butter dish. It's a manatee that holds squares that will hold a brick of butter. While we were there, we visited their local symphony and a few other things downtown. We stopped for a walk along a boardwalk that led to a small lake where there was this funny little covered bridge. It had just been built because there wasn't actually a bridge there, but it made a cute little landmark to look out at the lake. Our campsite would not properly operate my kiln, and I had things that had to be fired. We had taken my kiln apart to try to see if we could figure out what was wrong. With the help of the manufacturer, we determined the problem was where it was being plugged in, not the kiln itself. I found a local pottery who fired them for me. We took a trip to visit one of Mike's high school friends who runs a lovely restaurant on a winery in Georgia. It's right on the border. And we decided to drive on the Blue Ridge Parkway for part of the way. It was an amazing drive. If you find yourself near the North Carolina-Georgia border and are interested in some amazing food, send us a note. We'll send you where to go. Then it was time to pack up and head back to Indiana to see our favorite people. There was also some interesting things going on at the water plant by the campground. There was a very large mural being started, and it was kind of fun to watch its progress through the summer. We also had 2 family weddings and a graduation to attend, so we had lots of family time. On our way home, we stopped at another beautiful cemetery. In this one, the ground was covered in phlox, and around the shady areas, it was full of ferns and lily valleys, and there were violets. It was just beautiful. As we headed to Pennsylvania for my nephew's graduation, we had a lovely set of time there, not just for the party, but also to visit. We spent 2 weeks. The incline railway is closed for maintenance, so we weren't able to ride it, but we could look from the top and the view was amazing. And on another day, we went exploring Johnstown and its history of the Great Flood. It was during this time that we got the news that Mike had to report to an office at the beginning of August. So we set about trying to get ourselves moved to Ohio as residents because he was able to get assigned to the Columbus office. That's only 2.5 hours from our kids instead of the 8.5 that Minnesota was. But this required that we get another car because he was not going to be commuting in our big giant pickup. We also got in adequate playtime. At the end of July, we packed up our camper and moved over to the campsite we found in Ohio. We pay by the month, so we knew we would have this spot no matter what. We have done some exploring in the Ohio area that we are in, taken a few walks, visited lots of little towns, taken some really fun drives. He did go into the office on one day at the beginning of August, and they said, "Hello, nice to meet you, glad you're here. Please don't come back until we move offices." They did not have enough chairs for all of the people who work in that office to actually work in the office. So since he was turned loose until at least November, we packed up our camper and went back to Indiana, where we had some more fun times. We spent a couple of weeks, celebrated some birthdays, and then went back to Ohio for a few more weeks. I decided to begin focusing on my watercolor painting skills and signed up for an online class. It has been challenging and sometimes frustrating, but fun. And it's a little more portable than pottery. And then we headed back to Indiana again because Mike's sisters from California were coming to visit their mom. And we went over to spend a couple of weeks with them. Near the very end of October, all of Mike's siblings were able to be at his mom's house. It's the first time in several years that all of them have been together. We had a great dinner together and lots of laughter and visiting. The other big news on that trip was that we replaced our refrigerator. The one in the camper had stopped working reliably, so we did a lot of homework and research before we came to Indiana and figured out that it would be cheaper to simply replace it with a house model. It required some dissection to get the old one out, and we had to take the doors off the new one to get it in before we came back to Ohio, just in time for the campground trick-or-treating a couple days before Halloween. And of course, I got right back into my pottery. We had winterizing we needed to get done on the camper before the really cold weather set in. One of the major things we needed to get done was to put a skirt around it, and it's no longer portable. So this is where we will be parked until we get released from Wells Fargo to travel again. Shortly after we finished skirting the RV, which was a lot of my job, I fell down the stairs inside and managed to shatter my ankle. It required surgery, and I spent 3 or 4 days in the hospital. Unfortunately, my kiln was running when I did that, so Mike had to unload it for me and bring it inside. And then we took a trip to Indiana that was not scheduled because I can't put any weight on my foot, and my mother-in-law's house has no stairs. So that was where we went for Thanksgiving and the week around it. Now I have a real cast, and I still can't walk on it until sometime in January. But that's the catch up. No more pottery till I can walk on it. Thanks for watching.